Perfect. So I think we're on record, Daniel. So look, thanks for joining the MedTech Leaders Podcast, where we talk to leaders and professionals within the space to get their insights and advice. So I really appreciate your time. And yeah, like it would be great to just start with a little bit of intro into your background and journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Thanks for the invitation, first and foremost. I mean, as I referenced to you when we spoke before, been a business operator for about 20 years now, with an emphasis on cardiology and radiology space. I started on a clinical environment where I worked for half a dozen years, and as part of that journey, I was fortunate to interact with a lot of medtech companies and devices. So that gave me some nice leeways into moving into industry. So that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I did. From the clinical background, then I went in and took an engineering degree in computational engineering, and then an MBA, and then I've been working on startups ever since. So the better part of 15 years. Worked on multiple companies, all within the space of imaging, cardiology. A lot well successful companies, and then a lot of them not as successful. The usual mix for startups. But yeah, like I said, particularly over the last couple or 3 years, had some very good success on the companies I was working with as an operator, as an executive, and then obviously took some of that success as well to invest in some other companies in the space, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Really interesting. And in terms of your priorities right now, is that heart gnostics and AI for med imaging? Are those your...
Indeed. Yes, absolutely. So our agnostics is my own consulting business, but AI for med imaging, which has a product called AI for CMR, is my own business where I'm an operator and I'm an executive in that company. And we're focusing again on AI, where I have quite a wealth of experience over the last 10 years. So we're taking an array of AI technology and we're putting a practical spin to it. What do I mean? So we're using diverse components of AI. So AI is obviously a big bucket of where a lot of things fail. So we're using everything from computer vision to generative AI, deep learning techniques, and then we're applying that to diverse aspects of the workflow of reporting a cardiac MRI study. So we're automating that study about 5 or 6 times. So this is a study that can be very lengthy. It's very user dependent. So we're using AI, we're teaching AI to basically do things on a more standardized way and also a more automated way. So we're then helping the physician to do that exam quicker and more efficient, and also on a safer way in terms of the results get generated. So there's not a lot of movement for error as when we're doing things manually as a physician. Sometimes you might commit some errors in terms of the measurements or even on the report. You might get distracted because you're doing a lot of things at the same time. So our technology helps standardize all that and minimize human error.
Really interesting. Daniel, obviously AI is very obviously now the very hot topic now, but it seems like you've been in this space for a while. Have you got any kind of general advice for people that are trying to incorporate AI into their medtech company in terms of what they should be considering? Have you got anything you'd want to share there?
Yeah, I mean, right nowadays, who isn't, right? it's part of any normal business, right? So you need to incorporate it, not just on the product side, but on operations. It's just the new status quo, to be quite candid. My advice is don't go with the hype. Pick the techniques that make sense for you. Don't try to do things just because it's hype and I want to do generative AI because that's what everybody's doing. It's all about fixing a problem in the market or fixing an internal operational problem. It shouldn't be about the technology. And I see a lot of companies sometimes get lost in the hype at the expense of doing something that is actually fixing a problem. So it's not always the most complicated technology, and quite often it's even the simplest way to deal with a problem that actually get the thing done. So that's my advice, and that's what been working for me over the last 10 years or more. That's what I would counsel anyone to follow.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing some of your personal journey with like product development? So I guess like having an idea is one thing, but getting it all the way to a finished product obviously must have its challenges. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about the journey with that, the things you came across, and any insights?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, everyone has their own experience, so I'll take it from my own experience. I was been focusing on startups, and obviously startups, I have a lot of potential because in a startup, from one day to the other, if the right thing happened, the company can change. The potential is huge, but at the same time, typically, there's some inexperience in terms of how to best do a certain thing, or operationally how to get to a certain spot, or you're basically building things from the ground up, so you can certainly make a lot of mistakes. So that's the prism on typically how I look at things. In terms of my journey specifically, like I said, with startup companies, you're starting things from scratch, like I said. So sorry, I lost train of thought. Do you mind just, what was the original question?
Yeah, no, sorry. Like, sorry, even I've like kind of lost where I was going with things now. I was more saying, sorry, in terms of like going from like kind of the idea to the product.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, super. So I was talking about startups and I got distracted here. So yeah, obviously, like I said, in that prism, when you're basically taking something and you're a startup, a lot of these startups start on the academic world. So it's very easy to get focused on, solving a really complex problem in a test tube or on a lab. And then sometimes you overlook kind of getting that into the real market and getting tested and getting iterative feedback. And particularly, it's different if you're doing medical device or if you're doing a medical device as a software, for example, a software as a medical device. I think the latter should be and must be much more iterative. And sometimes you're taking things to a very large degree. You're almost building the final solution, and then you're going in and getting feedback. So the earliest you can get in as part even a potential prototype or and a solution that is just has the wires and the frames and getting some feedback, that can certainly save you a lot of time. A lot of startups commit a lot of mistakes and costly mistakes there, and then they sometimes need to get back to the drawing board, and that costs time. And in startups, time is money. So that's the counsel there. Just go as early as you can into the market, get some KOLs on your board, build an advisory board, get the solution into the hands of real people with a real problem that you're trying to fix, and see how all that actually gets and fix the issue or not. Sometimes really, obvious things only reveal themselves when you're actually trying to insert yourself into the ecosystem. And particularly, for example, in healthcare, obviously, you need to contend with public sector and private sector with their own ecosystem of other softwares and devices that your device needs to interact with. And there's restrictions in terms of security or even bureaucracy that sometimes impedes you to do what you want to do. And you really cannot design that out of just doing your own market research and your own experience. You really need to go into the market and test it.
Yeah, no, really interesting. I guess like just practically, Daniel, like, so like you say, you need to go into the market and test, but do you say what stage would you need to get your product to before you test? Because I guess it's a chicken and egg situation, because you don't want to invest too much into developing something that isn't the right fit for the market, but without developing something, you might not get enough feedback. So it's a tricky balance there. What would you say to people that are struggling with that?
And obviously, the generic advice, and obviously you need to adapt it to the type of device you're doing. Obviously, if you're doing something really complex that you need to have almost a finished product before you do your first in human or things of that nature, that's where you need to get to. But even then, there are certain things that you should be doing to validate the concept and fail fast and fail really fast. Check if that makes sense or not, if you're really fixing the problem, and if you're really fixing the problem in a way that it works within the market where you are inserted. And even if you don't have that finished product, there are things you can do in terms of mock-ups, getting, like I said, an advisory board up and getting regular meetings, setting up with them, sometimes face-to-face if you can muster that, and things will unveil themselves. If you're too much closed in the lab and you're trying to do things seeking perfection, more often than not, that's gonna backfire. So those are just some examples of things you can do, but really, as a whole, just get it tested as soon as you can. Get some people of your trust within your immediate circle. Get possibly some research agreements with trusts or hospitals within your immediate vicinity that you can go in and pitch some ideas. All of those things will pay off in the end. And often as a startup, you're trying to be disruptive, right? So more often than not, you're trying to chart a path that didn't exist. So you don't necessarily have a plan that somebody has done already, and you're just following something that has been done. You're charting your own path. So because of that, there's a myriad of things that can often go wrong. So if you're not preventing that, and you're not thinking of that as you're designing the product, then it's going to get really expensive towards the end of the product development cycle, where you need to kind of go back and change some foundational aspect around the architecture, or some security issues that you didn't think of when you designed it originally. It's always more expensive to go in and trying to fix them after they are developed, and developing and incorporating those issues as you're kind of building the product. So prototype, that's the way to go. And then iterate really, really quick, especially in software. If you're doing software the same way that you're designing a hard physical device, or the way that you're designing a car, then you're doing something wrong. The cycles need to be way faster. The way that you get that on an iterative fashion into the hands of the customer, and then you're iterating on that needs to be way, way quicker in software than in anything else.
Yeah, sure. Just really quickly, when going out and testing the product in the market, who should you be testing that with? Like, who should you be getting feedback from?
Yeah, but obviously the most obvious is the end user.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be myopic. More often than not, and again, hospitals are a complex environment, so there's often a number of different stakeholders that interact with your product, either directly or indirectly. So the end users are the obvious ones, but don't neglect all the other people that are interacting with them. Give you some examples, even for example on procurement, right? The way that you're already building the product in terms of how you capturing the value that you're delivering. So for example, the billing of the software itself, and depending on where you're considering to sell it on the first markets that you're selecting, there might be some restrictions in procurement in terms of how you want to get your value, so how you're billing for your product, and the way that they can actually do things. So for example, in software, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, the transition from CapEx into a more operational model has been the model of choice, but there are certainly some geographies that are still quite resistant to that. So you need to think about those things also when how you're designing the product. And for example, if you're charging by the exam, as many AIs are charging nowadays, that the procurement departments are prepared to contend with that. Then again, like I said, it's not an obvious stakeholder, and sometimes people overlook that. But there's many. Again, IT is another one. The legal department, obviously the executive team on the hospital that are responsible for making those decisions in terms of what solutions they want to use. They often have a different metrics of what way they're looking at than the end users, which are typically adopters. So you need to be able to position your solution in a way that it pleases or it addresses the issues of each one of those stakeholders.
Really interesting. I mean, one thing I do want to move on to as well is that you mentioned earlier on that you did quite a few different things. Some were successful, some not so successful. If you kind of reverse engineer back, did you notice any pattern in terms of the ones, say, that were successful, what you were doing, and maybe the ones that perhaps weren't as successful, where you kind of noticed, okay, this is quite important to do or not to do? Anything you feel that you noticed that was quite important in that journey?
That's interesting. I need to give it a second of thought, because it's an interesting introspection, because obviously every startup is a bit different, but you can always find patterns. I think one of the most important things as you're getting the startup up, and obviously if you're one of the founders or if you come in later, it's a bit different, but the team that you get around it's absolutely crucial.
Okay.
And it will tailor what you can do and what you want to do and what you can do. So make sure you get the right people on the table, and make sure that their horizon in terms of what they want to do is aligned with yours. Some people don't want to put 3 or 5 years into it, and if you have those discussions ahead of jumping on the boat, and that will save you a lot of heartache. So that's an obvious one. The second one, and I already kind of alluded to it in terms of obvious mistakes, is trying to seek perfection, and particularly if your inception as a company is very heavy on the team in terms of really high-end experts, engineers, or PhDs that are really well developed in terms of their knowledge of something. Typically, their level of seeking perfection, which is a good thing, can come in the way of actually going into the market with something that is imperfect and really getting it tested. So that's another common mistake, and I already referenced that multiple times. So those are two obvious patterns. So the team, the founding team, and then the second tier of people that you bring into the company. The third one, it's obviously managing your burn rate, and particularly it's on the ecosystem that we are now with artificial intelligence. There's a lot of companies coming in and doing really super disruptive things, but the competition is huge because everybody's trying to do it. So in terms of getting funding for your idea, it's important to align that with your appetite for growth. If you don't want to perhaps grow the team too large in the beginning and really trying to bootstrap things a little bit and seeing if you get that traction that then allows you to kind of get the financing that is allowing you to kind of grow your road ahead of you. So a lot of companies really fail there, which are developing really interesting technology, but then they don't have the financial structure to support the way that they're going at things, making sure that that's aligned with your business model and so on. So those will be three patterns. I can certainly think of more because, like I said, every startup is different, but those will certainly be three things to look at. So the funding team, go in and test it, get some regular feedback, and then make sure that your financial structure is aligned with your business model, so you don't have to lose too much focus of your own operational business to then go after and raising a Series A, and then that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. No, really interesting. Just one other thing I actually wanted to ask you, Dan, was a little bit more like of a general kind of business thing, where you said you've done lots of different things. There's one perspective that you need to stick at one thing long enough. So it's that fine balance, isn't it, between being resilient and knowing when to quit and maybe take another step. Like, what's your views on that? I just find that super interesting, like, because it's a really fine balance, isn't it? Are you quitting too soon, or have you now realized enough where you now need to go in a different direction? Have you got any advice on maybe how someone can work out whether they're just quitting too soon or whether they need to,
Yes, set some milestones for you, and as I referenced before, the part of the fail fast, right? So I may have a great idea on paper that I dreamed about, and I got a really good team around me, and it all seems to kind of click. But then you go into the market and you find some obvious things that is gonna either request you way more money than you can raise to fix that issue, or a number of reasons for why that product might fail, and sometimes the best idea at the wrong time is still not the best idea. It's a bad idea, right? You need to match the time with the idea. So just set yourself those milestones, and know if this doesn't work, that's crucial for my vision here. So I must go and do something else. But if you're committed to something, and if you have a team around you that you've kind of given your word, and you're invested into it, then don't quit. A lot of times, something will happen on a startup that you think this is the end, and then the next day something happens, and it completely flips things around. And that's what's super cool about startups. It's much harder to move a big company, right, when you're on track.
Yeah.
You have a lot of momentum, but to shift a big ship or to make something happen that is going to change the course of a huge company, it needs to be something humongous. And it's not the case on startups. Sometimes even the right client or bringing someone on board that has a specific technology, all of those sort of things can really change your path. So don't quit. If that's something that you want to do, go for it. Just make sure you have the right people around you. Don't try to do everything yourself. Things will go well.
Yeah, I guess the team part is a common theme I've noticed when speaking to MedTech founders, leaders, that having the right team is super important. I guess easier said than done, though, right? Like, let's be honest, if you're a startup, you haven't necessarily got lots of track record. It's risky. You don't have any evidence if it's going to work. Have you got any advice on what you need to be doing to attract the right individuals to your startup, and also essentially keep them as well, right? Because you've also mentioned the retention part is important, because the last thing you want is someone comes in for 6 months or a year, you're kind of back to the drawing board. Like, so what do you do with your recruitment to kind of minimize that risk? Have you got any?
So there's two questions in there. Kind of the core team obviously network, and make sure that the visions are aligned, and there needs to be different perspective of things, for sure. But in the end, we all must want the same thing. So make sure that the team have a very similar vision, if not the same vision, in terms of what you want to accomplish. You might have different visions in terms of how you want to get there, but the end goal needs to be the same.
Okay.
Otherwise, that's going to generate a lot of friction, right? So yes, diversification and different perceptions, but at least go for the same goal. Otherwise, that's going to create fractures on the foundation. In terms of then retaining the team, so that's the core team, right? So, and that
Yeah.
It's part of the core of the amicus of the company. In terms of then the people that have the skills that perhaps that core team don't have, then obviously make them part of the journey. One way to do that is obviously options. So make sure that the benefit is there for everyone. Is also the humane thing to do, not to mention the right thing to do as a company. So make sure you're using those instruments, those financial instruments, to reward the team that you need to have around you. Again, it's about the people around you. You cannot do everything yourself. I have a specific skill set, but I know where my flaws is. So I want to bring people that are complementing me in that, and they're crucial as well for the welfare of the company, right? So if they leave, then that's a core part of the team that I need to kind of go in and back in the market and recruiting. And I never have the assurance that the new person is gonna actually work. So that's always a risk. So make sure you're rewarding your team, making them part of the journey, and everything will be all right.
Sounds interesting. Would you say early on there's any particular departments or skills of expertise you need to be recruiting, right? Because there's lots of different departments, right? But at the end of the day, if funds are quite limited and you need to do things in an incremental manner, which departments or functions do you need to make sure you get absolutely right early on, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that answer is, it's very depending on in terms of what you want to do, what type of business you want to do.
Yeah.
But obviously, if the product doesn't work, everything fails around it, right? You might have the right financial structure, you might have the cleverest people around, the more experienced people around. But if you cannot get a product that is actually fixing an issue in the market, then it's all for nothing. So for me, that's also super important. So that's the most important thing. Then, like I said, make sure you have the financial structure around you that can be really lean, or it cannot be lean at all. But make sure that what you're doing is aligned and it's not at a mismatch, because otherwise that's going to cost you a lot of heartache in the future trying to resolve that. So either bootstrap or not, but make that decision and make sure you have the chops to follow it through. And then also on the operational side of things, I think that's super important, at least for me. So make sure to not overlook the aspects of all the business work, and having someone that can grow into that position or has a lot of experience in that is able to kind of put the team together on a day-to-day and make sure we're managing all of those aspects. Otherwise, you're going to start running, and the things are going to start, or you're going to accelerating the car, and things will start falling off the car. So make sure things are glued together by someone that can do that job.
Really interesting. I wanted to also just pick one other thing you mentioned around managing burn rate. So where do you think, from your experience, generally MedTech companies are investing too much money? Have you got a perspective on that, where they're going wrong, like where they're spending too much and what they should be doing differently generally?
Like I think I referenced this, but either bootstrap or not, but make sure you have the chops to back it up, right? So if you want to bootstrap, then there's some considerations in terms of your speed of growth, right? And you want to buy more than what you can chew. If you're more avid to kind of change the world, and you have the network and the experience to secure more funds, and you're sure that's not going to change in the immediate term, go for it, right? If you have the right financial support that can allow you to grow much more faster, have a bigger team that's going to really jumpstart things much quicker, do that as well. But don't do one thing in one way where the reality is the other one. So don't short sell yourself if you can obviously get a good financial structure in the beginning, but also don't buy more than you can chew, and then suddenly you have a lot of people dependent on you, and money's going to run out in a few months, and that's not a very good position to be. for yourself, but particularly for the people that have put some trust in you and decided to come work for this particular startup instead of somewhere else. So you do have a fiduciary fiduciary duty, to make sure that those people are well taken care of. So don't make that mistake.
Absolutely. The other thing I did want to ask you about, just related to this, is around funding, I guess, because lots of medtech leaders and founders I speak to, they believe they've got a great idea and they're really good to go with everything, but they just don't have the funding. From an investor perspective, I guess you'd be good at answering this with having been involved in different ventures, etc. What you look from an investor hat perspective, what should medtech companies be doing to give themselves the best possible chance to access funding when they go and ask for it? Like, where do you feel, what should they be doing and what should they try and avoid?
So show traction, right? Obviously, it depends on what type of investment you want around you, but it's a really challenging space right now in terms of raising cash, because again, everybody has some really clever ideas and they have the technology chops to make it work, but then you're competing with a lot of people in the same circumstances, right? So the pool remains the same, but there's more people swimming on it. You're gonna bump onto someone that is doing things just marginally better than you, and they're gonna take the trophy. And even though a few years you would definitely make it and you will have a queue of investors behind you, that's no longer the case today. With that in mind, from what you need to do, like I said, show traction, right? Make sure that things work not just on the paper, on your vision, but I actually have some customers that are actually taking out their wallet and they've paid you, and it's working. That's going to help. Obviously, when you're going, and if you can maximize your IRR, that's also going to give you a better valuation in terms of the money you're putting in the company and how much equity you wanna give out because of that. So make sure you're putting ourselves in a good, strong negotiation position going in, and even if you get the funding, it might be at the cost that you're gonna pay for it in the future. Like you might give out too much equity. Those are the things I think that I would bear in mind. So it's a really complex environment right now. It's really competitive in terms of raising, and also make sure that you're putting ourselves on a position that you can negotiate the best deal for you. Don't go for it if you can. Don't go for it unless you're really in a good position to negotiate. Otherwise, you're going to get a deal that it's not going to be the best for you and your team.
As in, you might dilute your business too much, essentially. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, you can. Sometimes not even at any cost you can get a deal because it's so competitive. But you can certainly get a deal, right? I'll give you 99% of my company you can certainly get a deal, but it might not be the best deal for you. Actually, nobody would do that deal because there's no skin in the game and the founders would just leave. But it's just an extreme example of what I'm saying. Right? Don't give up yourself too much equity. Make sure you're on a strong position. Make sure you've done your homework. Make sure that the company is on a good traction, and then you go in. Don't go in from a weak position and asking for money, because then you're on a weak position, right? So you're not going to get a really good deal. So it's any basic advice to any deal making, but it's the same in raising, right? So negotiate from a strong position. Make sure there's a lot of people that are interested in the business, not just one, because that way you can make sure you have the best deal for you. And that's not even just financially, but also the fit, right? Make sure that the people you're bringing in because the people that you're funding will be part of your team as well. A lot of times they will have a board seat as part of the investment and so on. So make sure that the people that you're bringing in are aligned with that vision and so on and so forth. Otherwise, they're gonna cost you a lot of heartache in the future if that's not the case.
Amazing. Look,
Even
Daniel,
money in.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I was saying, no, Daniel, I've taken so much of your time. Appreciate you've got other things you need to move on to, but thanks so much for all your honesty, candid insights and advice. I'm sure they've been really useful for people listening. So yeah, really appreciate everything. And
my pleasure, Junai. Always good catching up.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Daniel. Thanks. Bye.